Demo A is a mini exam I've given in a past semester. So we're going to walk through this together. It's been a while since I've solved these problems. So the aim here is to sort of give you some extra insight into how I think about solving these problems. Since this is the first one, I'll talk about the sort of the intro to the mini exam, just to give you some familiarity with what this is saying. And then we're going to start answering some of these questions. So we're going to call this Taylor's version. Okay. So mini exams take 15 minutes. I sometimes give a little bit more time, but in general, you can think about them as taking roughly 15 minutes. And then we'll take a break right after. The academic conduct code, the aim of this is really just to emphasize that we take the integrity of your work very seriously. This is here to protect you, to sort of to remind everyone of the integrity of the work that we're doing in class. So I'm just going to put my initials here. You can read through each one of these items. And then we get to the main part of the questions. So we have Colin Creevy, and so he can bake 20 Cornish pasties or 5 cauldron cakes. The printer had a little mistake here. So we're going to set up the PPF with pasties on the vertical and cakes on the horizontal, and then we'll find the opportunity cost. So I'm going to label on the vertical axis pasties. So we'll put pasties on the vertical axis and then cakes on the horizontal axis. Okay, and then just to set the axes here, the intercepts for the PPF. So if Colin produces only Cornish pasties, he can make 20. So we'll put 20 here, and then we'll put 5 on the horizontal axis because he can produce 5 if he's producing only cauldron cakes. And then this is we're not given any information about his relative productivity as he sort of moves across the two different outputs. So we're just going to assume this is linear. Okay, and then so to solve for his opportunity cost of 1 cake, all we have to do, right, in this situation where he can either produce one or produce the other, then we set this as an or relationship, which is the same as an equals relationship. So we're balancing this equation. So we have 20 Cornish pasties, 20p is equal to 5 cauldron cakes. And then all we have to do is solve for cauldron cakes. So we're looking for 1 cake. So we divide both sides by 5. This gives us 20 over 5p is equal to 1 cake. And this is the same thing as 1 cake is equal to 4 Cornish pasties. Okay, so the answer here is not 4, it's 4 pasties. We need to know the units of the thing we're giving up. So this is 4 pasties. Yum. Extra points if you've actually had a Cornish pasty. All right. So question 2, we're asked about efficiency. So let's say Colin's baking 10 pasties or 2 cakes. And 2 cakes in one day. So this is not an or relationship. This is an and relationship. Is this level of production attainable? So we're going to use the graph above. We could also use algebra if we wanted to, but the easiest way to do this is just to use a graph. So on the vertical axis, we know Colin is baking 10 pasties and then 2 cauldron cakes. So we know if Colin were spending half of his time, this is half of his time, making pasties, he would have half of his time left over to make cauldron cakes. And if he spent half of his time making cauldron cakes, that would be 2.5. The point we're looking for is at 10 and 2. So we know this point is attainable. It's not on the outside of the PPF. So the answer here is yes. So we've used our knowledge about his PPF to help us answer this question whether this is something you could actually do. All right, so that's nice. Question 3 is about absolute and comparative advantages. So here we're going to, again, calculate some opportunity costs and then look at comparative advantages. So the way we do this, we want to set up a production table first, and then we're going to set up an opportunity cost table. So we have Katie Bell, who can also bake Cornish pasties and cauldron cakes, and she has her 2 numbers here. So let's set up a production table. All right, so we have Colin, we have Katie, and then we have pasties and cakes. Colin, we're given the information over here, so this is 20 pasties and 5 cauldron cakes. And then for Katie, she can produce 15 pasties and 8 cauldron cakes. Okay, so to answer the question about absolute advantage, we can just use the production table. Make that look like a P. So looks like Colin has the absolute advantage in pasties because he is able to produce more in one day than Katie can. So we're going to write Colin in this box. Colin has the absolute advantage in growing, not growing pasties. I guess pasties may grow on some magical tree, but I think in most places you have to actually bake these things. Okay, so that's nice. We've answered the first part of this question. So the second part, we have to set up an opportunity cost table. So we'll set up another table. And so again, we're going to have pasties and cakes. We're going to have Colin and Katie. And then we have to fill in the entries here with opportunity costs. So Colin actually, already we've calculated his opportunity cost of 1 cake. So all we have to do is, for this entry here, we know the opportunity cost of 1 cake. And if it's helpful, you can write like 1 pasty and 1 cake. In exchange for 1 cake, Colin has to give up 4 pasties. And the math here is simple to find the second entry once we have the first one. We have 1 cake is equal to 4 pasties. And then all we have to do is divide both sides by 4. So we get 1/4 cake is equal to 1 pasty. All we've done is divide by 4. And this tells us the opportunity cost of 1 pasty, which is 1/4 cake. Okay, so this is for Colin. Next, we have to do this for Katie. And we haven't simplified this equation before, so we'll start there. We have 15 pasties is equal to 8 cakes. And then we'll divide both sides by, let's start with 1 cake. So we divide both sides by 8. So this gives us 15/8 pasties is equal to 1 cake. So 1 cake, we have to give up 15/8 pasties. And then we just take the inverse. So it's 1 pasty is equal to 8 over 15 cakes. Okay, so just about a half of a cake. 8 over 15 cakes. My handwriting is as atrocious as the acoustics in this room. Okay, so nice. So we have the opportunity cost table set up here. And to answer the question about comparative advantage, we just have to look at who has a lower opportunity cost in making pasties. And to answer this question, we just look at who has the lower opportunity cost, which we've entered in the pasties column. And you can see 1/4 is, this number here is just a little bit larger than 1/2. So 1/4 is definitely lower. So we're gonna put a circle around this to indicate that that's a comparative advantage. And then, we can circle this for completeness, although we're not explicitly asked for this. So we have Colin, who also has a comparative advantage in pasties. This doesn't necessarily always happen. Absolute and comparative advantage are independent concepts. It just turns out in this case that that Colin has both the absolute and comparative advantage in pasties. Okay, so that's nice. So what we're gonna do next is question 4. So we're gonna try to find an improving trade. And what's going to be helpful here is that we've already constructed the opportunity cost table. So this is going to be incredibly useful for us. So we're trying to trade 1 cake for some number of pasties. And we can see in this column, in the second one, we have 1 cake in exchange for these two opportunity costs. So all we have to do, in lecture we set up a bunch of complicated, somewhat complicated models for thinking about who's trading with who, in which direction are the two goods flowing, so who's specializing in what, and then who's trading in which direction. But we don't have to deal with so much of that. You can think about these things if you like. But all we have to do is try to find some number in between 4 pasties and roughly 1/2 pasty that will sort of fit in that interval. And that's an exchange rate that will work. So Colin has the comparative advantage in pasties, so he's going to produce pasties and then trade them with Katie at some exchange rate, which we're going to define, and Katie is producing cauldron cakes. And so they'll trade with each other according to this, and that's going to be better for both of them than producing both on their own. Okay, so nice. So let's try to fill this in. Anything between 4 pasties and roughly 1/2 pasty is going to work. And so a number something like 2 would work in this case. 2 is between 4 and roughly 1/2. So 1 for 2. And that's it there. All right. So we're going to answer our last question here. So Colin, turns out he loves his job. It's rewarding for him, so he increases from 5 to 8 hours per day. So we're going to set up both Colin's old PPF and his new PPF on the same graph. And then we're going to find the opportunity cost of a cake. All right, so Colin's old opportunity cost was, it was 5, we have C on the horizontal, P on the vertical, and 10, 20. And then what we're trying to do is try to find we know the the PPF shifts out. We know it's going to shift out, but we want to find what these numbers are. The horizontal axis is going to be pretty easy to find. This is just going to be 8 because of these simple numbers. But the ratio here is a little different. We've gone from 5 hours producing 20 to 8 hours. So per hour, Colin can make so 4p per hour. And this is just 20 over 5 p per hour. So that's 4 per hour. So now we have to multiply this times 8. So this is 4p times 8 gives us, what's that, 32. So this on the vertical axis is 32. So we shifted out, and now we found the new axes simply by figuring out the rates, and then we multiply through, and then plotted the two extremes. So we definitely know it's shifting out, and then we find the extremes. So then the next thing we have to do is find the new opportunity cost. So we have 32p is equal to 8c. You might see a trick here. We divide both sides by 8, which gives us 4p is equal to 1c. So we have 4p is equal to 1c. So the opportunity cost of one cake is 4 pasties. And it turns out this is the same as from before. We haven't changed anything about the slope. The slope has stayed the same. We've shifted out both axes at the same rates. So the slope hasn't changed as we've gone from 5 hours to 8 hours. You can think of this like per hour, nothing has changed about Colin's productivity, even though he's working more hours. Okay, so this is, an example of the types of questions I like to ask on mini exams. The length can vary a little bit. I've listed 15 minutes. This might be, a little too much for 15 minutes. It might be perfect. The questions might look slightly different. With mini exams, you'll never see exactly the same questions, and often you won't see the same types of questions. You'll see something slightly different than this. But I like to give this as just an indication of the kinds of things I like to ask. If you've done the work, you've done the preparation, you're going to be in good shape for the mini exam. And I will see you there.